produit son effort trop tôt, il a sprinté dans la distance alors qu'il a la distance plus un tour. C'est maintenant Anctil qui conserve la corde avec dans sa roue Simpson, le leader de l'équipe Peugeot, un Anglais extrêmement régulier, vainqueur l'an dernier de Bordeaux-Paris. Voici le dernier virage, toujours Anctil en tête avec Simpson. Anctil qui remporte cette étape.
En environ pour Jacques Anctil qui termine même en roue libre. Tape pour Jacques Anctil, mais il y a, semble-t-il, 41 ou 42 secondes que Raymond Poulidor est arrivé.
Au classement général, à l'aise Sidney, vous le voyez, il a monté à sa main, j'ai l'impression même qu'il ne l'a pas forcé, il nous en français car il arrive décontracté, top pour Sidney, il arrive décontracté, il porte encore à la tête la blessure de la descente des Pyrénées, vous vous souvenez qu'il avait même perdu.
Voici que passe le porteur du maillot jaune qui vient d'accomplir un retour éblouissant, qui, devant les voitures, monte en dansant, debout sur ses pédales, à un rythme extraordinaire.
I don't like to just purely go away, create some art and say, here it is, this is what we're going to do. We're calling it When the Fox Met the Rooster is our project title, and essentially the fox represents Luxembourg and the rooster is the Tour de France. So it's Luxembourg meeting the Tour, and so that combination makes it that moment in time. Folklore tells of a grand race which cut across impassable snow-capped peaks and treacherous windswept shores. Over 100 editions of the Grand Boucle have rolled its giant loop, each writing the triumphs and tragedies of legendary adversaries. And so it was a fox called Renert found himself on a soft sunny morning sitting upright outside the Café au Réveil Matin in Montjoie, a small town on the southern edge of Paris. Shortly, a small man sporting an oversized newsboy cap parked a bicycle nearby, sat down on the grass and took a long draw on a dusty bottle of red wine. "Won't that affect your ability to cycle?" inquired Renert. The small man fixed his gaze on the fox. "I hope so," came the response. Renert came to understand the man had once been a chimney sweep, and although born in far-off Italy, was trying to embrace the culture of his new homeland. And so he'd entered the first edition of this grand new bicycle race, with high honours at stake. Happily, the little chimney sweep would win. 1 year later, Renert discovered that the very same fellow, both to buy more red wine, along with oysters, coffee and champagne, and despite fistfights and muggings along the way, had repeated his feat. Later, Renert learned he was unceremoniously stripped of the achievement, having been found to have swapped his bicycle for a passenger train. His next encounter was with a taciturn man who wore what appeared to be motorcar racing goggles, but on his forehead. He was also proudly sporting a bright yellow jacket. "Where did you acquire this fine golden apparel?" asked Renert. "In Paris," came the reply, "on day 1, and I kept it until the end on day 22. He later confessed to riding a rather awkward lady's bicycle on day 19 for over 100 kilometers. Odd, thought Renert, why make this demanding race so much harder? Better than toiling on a farm, the farmer from Marmar replied. War intervened. Soon after, the special yellow jacket was to be wrapped around the very muscular and broad shoulders of a pious man of iron, who had travelled from the Italian town of Florence. Renert sat quietly at the feet of this concrete individual, whose face spoke of combat and conflict. Eventually he spoke. Good is something you do, not something you talk about. Renert pricked up his ears. If you're good at a sport, they attach the medals to your shirts, and they shine in some museum. That which is earned by doing good deeds is attached to the soul, and shines elsewhere. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Renert sprang to his feet. It's not every day you come across an angel, particularly one riding a bicycle. The fox ran beside this blue-eyed divine messenger for as long as he could keep the pace. The rider's short legs were spinning feverishly, his gaze fixed on some distant memory. You ride like a man possessed, suggested a panting Renert. It's life or death, said the angel of the mountain, and life is fleeting. Oh really? Coughed Renert, now struggling to stay on the celestial being's wheel. I used to work as a slaughterman in Battenburg. The fox suddenly stopped in his tracks. This particular angel seemed to be either chasing a dream or riding away from a nightmare. It was time for diversion and an ice cream. Nonchalantly perched on a low stone wall, the fox happened upon an eagle, supping on a rapidly melting ice cream, with an air of devil-may-care detachment. May I join you? Inquired Renert. The eagle nodded to an empty patch of stone to his side. Renert purchased a fresh ice cream from the nearby vendor, and they both sat in silence, with nothing else to do than enjoy frozen fare on the peak of the Col de la Romière. The Eagle of Toledo had flown all the way from Spain in order to compete in the race which, Renert discovered, was going quite well. The fox would learn there were a number of ways in which the race could be won. Some would enact a physical duel with their rivals. Others would wait until the signs of weakness were shown and then pounce. And then there were those who treated the entire procedure almost scientifically, reliant on their ingenuity and an apparent approach of economy of effort. One such individual who crossed the fox's path was Monsieur Chrono, an elegant fellow whose blue eyes suggested a frosty soul. I can reduce the race to a few simple calculations, he told Renert, as they both sat on the deck of a gently bobbing wooden boat. I only deal in seconds, stated the Frenchman, the first rider to win the race a record 5 times. Renert looked along the boat's flank. He noted the whistles of 59 painted along one side and wondered whose whistles they were. It must have been very hard for you to win so many times, said Renert. Did you drink lots of red wine and eat oysters washed down with coffee and champagne? Monsieur Chrono laughed. Well, it certainly wasn't mineral water. For me, success is all about preparation, for which there is nothing better than a good pheasant, some champagne, and a woman. The fox raised a brow. Complex fellows, these champion cyclists, he thought, while jumping ashore. One day, as Renert turned a street corner, he bumped headlong into a broad-smiled gentleman, sporting a bowler hat and twirling a tightly wrapped umbrella. "Terribly sorry, old chap. Hope there's no damage." "Not at all," said the fox, brushing his fur back into alignment. The jovial Englishman prodded the tip of his umbrella skyward in a mock jousting gesture. "I'm off to fight with a giant." "A giant? How brave of you. Where does he live?" The gentleman, who Renert discovered later went by the name of Mr. Tom, was en route to the south of France, with the intention of battling with the god of evil, the giant of Provence. This mythical colossus never forgave weakness, staring down on his foe with a bald face so terrible it resembled the crater-pocked, dusty surface of the moon. The fox's throat grew dry. "And you plan to take on this giant with just your bicycle and an umbrella?" Mr. Tom had the most beguiling smile. "Through courage and cunning you can achieve a great many things, my furry friend." He gently patted the crown of the fox's head. "And if it doesn't work out..." Renert never did discover Mr. Tom's alternate ending. With travel comes knowledge. By now the fox was some distance into his long journey, and much the wiser for it. He had determined that his extraordinary race was not just about the competitors on their bicycles, but also about the landscape through which they travelled. The road, with its ups and downs, was a meandering metaphor for life itself. There were races within races, and life was often hard and unpredictable. Yet at one stage, Renert found himself in the company of the predictable. Such was the prowess of this particular race entrant. Predictions and bets were only made on who would come second. Sporting slicked back, shiny black hair, the shadowy man seemed to enter a dark place when on his bicycle. Off it, he told Renert, "To make the race as hard as possible, I attack myself." The fox nodded. "How strange. Isn't that what your opposition is supposed to do?" "I have a sword above my head when I ride. The only danger I face is me." Sensing a muddle of misunderstanding, Renert bade farewell, which he was much relieved to have executed so early, when later unearthing this particular cyclist went by the name of Le Cannibal. Further up the road, Renert was pleased to briefly share the tarmac with a sprightly young foal. "Do you know about this amazing race?" he asked. "Indeed I do," replied the foal. "It comes wrapped in red polka dots and tastes so very sweet." "Foals are not so bright," decided the fox, and took the next exit. It was through this change of direction that Renert stumbled across Joop, the most successful rider that no one has ever heard of. "What makes you so anonymous?" probed Renert. "History is my witness," he replied. "Nobody wants to know who came second." A fox is taught at a young age to be first. He couldn't see Joop, who was eternally second, making a good fox, and took his leave. This journey of discovery, following the biggest race in the world, made Renert realize that those who took part were so varied and diverse. Much like day and night, they could be bright and beguiling, but also obscure and scary. Into the latter category firmly fell his next encounter. "I can see why they call you Il Pirata," suggested the fox, as he sat beside a pocket-sized pirate, replete with trimmed facial whiskers, single gold earring, and a bandana-wrapped bald head. Yes, I'm a nonconformist, said the man. I behave in the way I see fit. I have freedom of thought. I can relate to that, said Renert. Yet for all his freedom, the little pirate seemed somehow trapped. Despite having won the race, and won the special yellow jacket, there remained an air of shyness and detachment, even paranoia. All those battles, thought the fox. This race is so demanding. He was relieved when the mood was lightened by a man called Andy, who sat with the fox by the bank of the Moselle River. It was here that Renert became acquainted with the complex world of in-race etiquette, unwritten rules, and the chivalrous entente cordiale within this mysterious, multi-membered entity known as le peloton. Paradoxically, within the bosom of this form existed both sanctuary and asylum. It was a place of solidarity, but one which, with the next breath of wind, could turn into a hunting demon of frightening speed. Its members, as Andy described, can also turn on themselves. Better to be a lone wolf, thought the fox. The complex machinations of the race were once summarized with us by one of its colourful participants. If you draw your sword and you drop it, you die. While skipping stones across the water, Renert, feeling intrepid, asked Andy, "What happens when you stop racing?" The tall man, who had once famously sported the virtuous white trousseau of the best young rider, replied wistfully, "You don't recognize your legs anymore." Renert gazed down at his hindquarters. It was time to move on. Befuddled with so many stories, Renert was just about to turn and head home when a flash of light and a blast of hot air whipped his face whiskers into a knot. Eventually he managed to catch up with the source. "I am the Manx missile," the fox was told as he stood untangling his whiskers. Just when the fox thought the story was at a conclusion, he then became enlightened with the daring do inherent in the pursuit of emerald attire. For alongside the yellow jacket and the white and the red spotted, there also existed a green version, championed by the fast and fleeting. Renert listened to the missile man explain the high-risk world of the speedsters, who would enact a trope of anonymity for a whole day, only to appear in the final moment, out from behind a train, to win the day and win the right to claim the verdurous prize in Paris. "I thought taking trains was against the rules," said Renert, confused. At journey's end, the fox was indeed among exalted company, standing alongside the Grand Boucle's most prolific victor, as no other cyclist had fought and won more contested races than this unique individual. "Why do you ride?" asked Renert, seeking a means to close his book on the race. The missile paused, dropped one leg back across his machine, and before heading off into the distant horizon said, As long as I'm riding a bike, I know I'm the luckiest guy in the world.